What's the matter with your life? Why you gotta mess with mine? Don't keep sweating what I do, cause I'm gonna be just fine. Check it out. If I wanna take a guy home with me tonight, it's none of your business. And if she wanna be a freak and sell it on a weekend, it's none of your business. Now you shouldn't even get into.
By this point, I feel like the patriarchy is just one of society's classic menacing villains. Like, just when you think we've defeated it, patriarchy just shows right back up. Patriarchy's place in our collective consciousness kinda makes it easier to define than most terms, but just to make sure that we're on the same page, patriarchy is a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. Right off the bat, you can probably see how this episode could go. I'd tell you the history of women being oppressed by patriarchal systems in both the public and private sphere, and how that expanded into systems of oppression based on gender expressions and norms as well as sexual orientation. Then I'd tell you how that history relates to schooling and education before wrapping things up in a nice little summary. You want to know something? Yeah, that's exactly how this episode is going to go. I'm not sure I need to do a deep dive on how the United States was exclusively and largely still is ruled by men. Do a deep dive on heads of government in the United States or heads of Fortune 500 companies, and you'll see what I'm saying. The real element of that history, most important to us, is how the rule of men created a specific definition of men, which created an even more specific definition of women, and ingrained a playbook from everything to appearance to whether or not you can have a credit card. Manhood in the United States is conceptualized largely through the eyes of white men doing, things white men do. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, too. When someone says a man is manly, your mind goes to things like their muscles, possibly being good at building things, being emotionally stoic, heterosexual, maintaining a sense of rugged individualism, maybe even doing sports. Things like that. What we equate with manliness or masculinity or manhood. And if you do the same exercise for women, you'll find that society has a pretty specific set of behaviors and customs attributed to how women should act and exist. The point here is that conceptions of men and women in the United States is wrapped up in specific ideas of gender, sexual identity, and sex, not to mention race, class, ethnicity, religion. It's mixed up in a lot of things. And that's why I want to stop here for a moment to straighten some of it out. Gender and sex, for those of you that don't know, they're not the same thing, but they do share a complex interrelationship. Sex, like biological sex, refers strictly to the biological makeup of a male or female concerning external genitalia, sex chromosomes, hormones, and internal reproductive structures used to assign an infant as a male or a female at birth. And gender is defined as the personal traits and position in society connected to being a male or a female. This typically includes the interrelationship between an individual's sex, an internal sense of self as a male or female, both or neither, and the outward presentation and behavior of their gender. Sociologists, they also believe that gender is a social construct that categorizes people. It assigns characteristics to those categories and places values on those characteristics. And like other constructs, like race, for example, gender is reinforced by society in a lot of ways. Practically everything is assigned a gender: toys, colors, clothes, and acceptable behavior for boys and girls. Patriarchy helps uphold those ideas of gender norm and gender performance. Femininity is attached to the quality of being a female. Masculinity is attached to the quality of being male. And blurring those lines is often not acceptable. Then you have sexuality, or what we typically think of as a sexual orientation. That describes who you are physically, spiritually, and emotionally attracted to. For example, if you are a male who is attracted to females, you might consider yourself straight. If you are a male and you are attracted to both males and females, you might consider yourself bisexual. And if you're a male who is attracted to other males, you might consider yourself gay. Of concern to social foundation scholars, like you and me, are how stereotypes around sexuality and gender and sex, femininity and masculinity, all that stuff, how those stereotypes might be taught to the hidden curriculum to children in schools. It brings up questions like, what are the consequences of learning specific gender stereotypes at such early ages? And how might that impact the way gender norms and roles are created and performed in society? What we're trying to say is that if those things are existing in education, then norms of gender and sexuality are also equally pervasive in our society, so much so that they're almost inescapable. And that's why all of this is a problem that concerns patriarchy. For those who practice patriarchy, attributes seen as feminine or pertaining to women, even things like being gay or queer or gender nonconforming, are undervalued, while attributes regarded as masculine or pertaining to men are privileged. And we might think about those issues of gender and sexuality and sex and power in relation to patriarchy when considering the origins of our school system. Since the founding of American public schools, girls and women in the U.S. have typically had less educational opportunities than men, purposefully. And today's schools are still heavily operated on gender dynamics from the past. And although different from previous era, those gender dynamics still hold great influence today. You gotta remember that schools were once initially only for white property-owning male students, and the shift to include women only occurred after schools expanded and leadership positions were created, so we're talking 1920s. And by this time, gender roles shifted and men who were teachers were considered suspicious to work in positions held predominantly by women, and since then you've largely seen women as caretaker teachers and men in administrative positions within schools. And that's why critical scholars are asking folks to see how schools still largely play into gender roles established by patriarchal forces. Consider that the majority of children start their educational journey at daycares. I had an office next to a preschool and daycare for over a year, and I couldn't help but notice the categorization of toys. And they were labeled as either being appropriate for boys versus those that are appropriate for girls. Dollhouses and dolls and kitchen toys, coloring books and ponies were toys that were largely made available for girls, while sports balls and toy vehicles and action figures were toys that were mostly made available for boys. And through little examples like that, you can see how patriarchal ideas swirl almost hidden throughout American schooling. And there you have it. That's my take on how patriarchy continues to cause issues within society, especially schooling and education. If you would, take some time to consider where you learned your gender roles, or how school reinforced gender roles and norms, or ask yourself how a society is still hostile to changes in gender identity and sexuality. Questions like that, they're helpful to ask. So is taking the time to let all this sink in. And that's what I'm going to go do. I hope you'll join me and we can ponder together about the forces of the damn patriarchy.
Sell it on the weekend. None of your business. Now you shouldn't even get into who I'm giving skins to. It's none of your business. So don't try to change my mind. I tell you one more time. It's none of your business. How many rules am I to break before you understand that your double standards don't mean shit to me? I know exactly what you say when